Nate, welcome.
Hey, Tim, always good to be here.
Well, I'm excited to talk over with you the pharmacist guide to buying a home. You are the real estate agent slash pharmacist expert that I look to when it comes to the home buying process. So we're going to talk through the long-term benefits of home ownership, how to determine whether or not someone is ready to buy, pros and cons of renting versus buying, key members of the home buying team, all the good stuff when it comes to buying a home. So let's start, Nate, with the long-term benefits of home ownership. I think it's something that many of us were probably told from our parents, maybe grandparents, hey, got to buy a home, right? That's just kind of part of growing up, part of the financial planning process. But times can change in terms of prices of home and where that may or may not fit in the financial plan. And so it's important we first understand what are those long-term benefits of home ownership before we talk about how it might fit into the financial plan.
Yeah, I think you're right that it's always argued that this is like the only answer, and there are certainly benefits there, but it's like any other decision, something you want to weigh the costs and benefits. And so, generally speaking, the benefits of buying a home are that you're hopefully building equity in something, right? So when you're
Hmm.
paying for your housing costs, that money is going to pay down the debt you have on that home, and hopefully at the same time that home is gaining value, right? And if we look at the traditional market over the course of many, many years, homes generally go up in value. And so the goal being that, hey, I'm going to buy this, live here for X amount of years, and it's going to be worth more someday, or I'm going to have more equity built into that house at some point. That would be sort of a contrast to renting
Hmm.
where every dollar you're putting in, you've got a great place to live and you've got the flexibility that comes with that, and you can move, pretty much at any time. But at the end of that, you don't really have anything to show for it, and that's sort of the quote unquote downside to the renting side of it.
Yeah, Nate, one of the things I think we don't talk enough about when it comes to benefits of long-term home ownership, is yes, there's the financial aspect. Of course, we're trying to build equity over a long period of time. I think it's sometimes hard to feel that because when you're
Hmm.
paying off a mortgage over 30 years, unless you're tapping into that equity in some way to help your financial plan, right? That's a future thing for a lot of us. But in the moment, when I think about my own home purchase journey and our family, like that point of, hey, this is our own place. Like this is where the memories are made for our family. This is our home. This is our community, and that's sometimes hard to put a number on, but that's an important benefit, right? When we think about home ownership.
I think that those other benefits, the non-financial benefits, are the ones that are really often not talked about, but often the thing that's making someone make that decision, right?
Yes.
It's, hey, I need a fence for my dog, or I want to put in a garden and my landlord won't let me. Like stuff that seems pretty like benign or pretty simple on the surface, that like those are actually the decisions that drive someone to buy. Like,
Yeah.
yes, the finances are there, but it's really funny how many clients I work with and people I talk to, it's like, what was the thing that made you want to buy? And it was like, oh, we need a place for our three dogs. Like
Yeah.
that was the move. So I think it's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about here in a moment just the readiness to buy, but obviously we want to be in that place where we can be stable in that home and hopefully reduce the need to transition more than once. Sometimes we can't predict that, right? That a
Sure.
move might need to happen. But let's talk about being ready to buy. Speaking here, especially to the first time home buyers, those that are, hey, I'm in a rental situation, I'm looking to buy, I think I want to buy a home, but I've got all these other things going on in my financial plan, whether it be student loans, whether it be building an emergency fund, getting started with savings and investing. And when we talk about such a big decision, especially something that we might be paying on for 30 years in many cases of folks that are on a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, how can we begin to think about, are we ready to buy a home? Because we know that the bank has their own criteria. They have to do that. But our criteria may be different than theirs, correct?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And if you go to any lender and say, "Hey, I want to buy. Here's my criteria, or here's my salary," they're going to give you a number of what they think. And I think if you look at anybody who's thinking about buying, and just about anybody, any situation, there is some barrier, some roadblock in your way. Like it's going to be down payment, or
Mhm.
student loan debt, or the housing market we live in is X or Y, right? There's always going to be something in the way. The thing you can control, no matter what, is assessing where you're at, figuring out your own budget, and having a good plan going into it. If you do those things, you're going to set yourself up for success regardless of everything else, right? Because if
Mhm.
you have $200,000 in student loan debt, but you buy a house that, maybe you and a spouse are going in it together, and you buy it and you can cover it with just one salary instead, so that you have extra money to be able to pay down debt and get those student loans under control, right? There's always a plan as long as you have a plan. And that's kind of the
Mhm.
most important part you can set up with.
Yeah, you want to work the budget, right? I always say, set your budget before you go out and look at homes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And again, you're going to talk with a lender, and they're going to have their own criteria, and it's good to know those. But that may or may not fit within your financial plan and your goals. Everyone's situation is different. Every area is different. What the market is doing is different in different time periods. So make sure you're setting your own budget and taking a step back to look at, hey, how does the home purchase fit in with the context of all these other financial goals that we're trying to achieve? Because the last thing we want to do is obviously get into that home purchase and then feel like we're suffocating, because of the other things and not having the cash flow. I think we've established, at least briefly, what are the main benefits of home ownership, but there can be value for some people when it comes to renting
Mhm.
situation. Who are those folks where you think about, hey, renting may be a good fit, at least for this season of life?
Yeah, I think alluded to this briefly, but I think the idea that if you are looking for flexibility, you can't beat renting, right? Because if you want to move out, you've got, maybe a year lease at the most, right? You can make that decision. You don't have to worry about market changes, because if move out, then you move out, right? You go somewhere else. So if you're in a residency for a year and you need to go somewhere else, like, there you go. You have the
Mhm.
ability to make that move. The other people that I think are good to consider for renting are those that might not want to have to deal with big single cost issues that come up, right? If you want to know your monthly payment within a reasonable amount every single month, renting can be great for that. Home buying looks very stable on the surface, and it is.
Mhm.
But if you have a furnace that goes out, a roof that needs replaced, a flood in your basement, like, all of those things can suddenly pop up, and it can be huge expenses that you might not have been planning for. So if that worries you, or you're not in a position where you could handle that financially, renting might be a great fit, because that's going to fall onto the homeowner, right? Or the rental property company that you're going through.
Yeah, one other I would think about here, Nate, too, as well. Those 2 points are fantastic. Would be those that are in very high cost of living areas
For sure.
where, I think of our pharmacist colleagues that are out on the West Coast or in the Northeast or in the DC area, where maybe salaries aren't, they're higher, but maybe they're not adjusted as much with cost of living. And it may be that purchase price is just out of reach given the area that you're in. So,
Great point as well.
um,
Yep.
what about key members of your team when it comes to the home buying process? I'm thinking back, Nate, to my own first experience buying a home way back in 2009. And, it started with an online search. And then all of a sudden I was talking to an agent. And then all of a sudden I was searching for lending options. And I felt like I didn't have an intentional strategy or really give any thought into who are the people that I want on my home buying team and how can I be proactive about that rather than chasing that while I'm off and running looking at homes.
Yeah, I think the idea of a team can sound overwhelming sometimes. You're like, I barely know what I'm doing, and you want me to build a team around that? Like,
Mhm.
that sounds like a lot. Generally speaking, though, the people you're going to have on your team are a real estate agent, a lender. You might have to have a contractor. You might have to have an attorney in some states, maybe an accountant. Things like that go with the home buying process. The thing I think I would tell anybody, and this is pretty typical no matter where you're looking, is that if you get one of those people, they're going to know a reference in every other department, right? If you get a good real estate agent, they're going to know a lender, and they're going to know an attorney, and they're going to know a contractor or five, right? So you don't have to necessarily know all of these people, find all these people right off the get-go. Interview and find one good
Mhm.
person, and let that good person reference you to the others that you might need.
Yeah, I really like that because I think when it comes to this process, especially for those that are going through it the first time, when we start to list off all those individuals, people are like, where do I get
Yeah,
started? Right.
exactly.
But I think if you've got a really good trusted agent, as we're talking about
Right.
here, they're going to have those relationships where they can introduce you to people and they've been down that path and that process. The next thing I want to talk about is the financing. Probably the
Mm.
most questions I get, Nate, are around the financing for good reason, right? When we talk about financing a home purchase, this is one of the biggest purchases we're ever going to make in our careers. We're talking big numbers, especially for those that might have a bigger down payment. I think there's a lot of unknown and maybe some questions around the different options and products that are out there. And because of that confusion, it adds to those feelings of overwhelm, especially in a purchase that can be both exciting and emotional, depending on where you're at in the journey. So, For those that are going through this, especially going through this for the first time, that are wondering, how in the world do I determine how much I'm going to put down, which product is best? I've heard all the different products, whether it's conventional or FHA or something like a pharmacist home loan or a doctor loan product. What are your thoughts on pharmacists navigating these financing options to determine which of those is the best fit?
Yeah, I think just as you alluded to, there are a ton of options, and you could literally have a down payment anywhere from 0% to 25%, and you could have an interest rate that fluctuates by 1 or 2%, right? It is so varied that it's really difficult for people to find a way to jump in. My recommendation is to do like we do in pharmacy, right? If you don't know and you need a specialist, go to that specialist. Find the expert that you can talk to kind of get that information, right? So it might be a lender that your realtor refers you to, or a lender that you know, or even just the bank you currently bank at, and just say, hey, I'm thinking about buying a home. I'd love to talk through lending options. Can you help me start to understand this? And then you can ask really targeted questions of, okay, if I only have 5% down, what are my options? Or, hey,
Mhm.
we sold another property years ago and now we're ready to buy again. What does it look like if we do have 30% to put down? Like, is that an option? Does
Yeah.
that help me? What are my choices based on that information? So start with one piece of information, talk to an expert, and just start asking questions to get the information that you need, and they'll push you in the right direction.
Yeah, and my experience here, Nate tells me the relationship piece is really important.
Mhm.
And I think in today's day and age of technology, I feel old saying that out loud, where you can do pre-qualifications online, you can enter information. Be careful, your phone will be ringing off the hook after you do that.
Definitely.
But having a person that you can talk about, a team that you can interact with when things, not if, but when things come up during the lending process, whether it's a question during underwriting, or you're
Mhm.
trying to navigate different loan options, or you have a change in your credit, or questions about reserves that you need. And, all these wrinkles will happen. Hopefully you can be proactive as much as possible. But to be able to pick up the phone and call someone and work through those is huge. I remember I went through a refinance process several years ago, and I essentially went and did what I think a lot of pharmacists do. Hey, let me get three options, right? So I've got
Mhm.
my local credit union, I've got kind of big box bank that I've worked with in a previous loan that got bought and sold throughout a process, and then I had a third option that we were evaluating. And it was very obvious as I went through those three options what the experience was going to be like or not going to be like in terms of what the fit is there. So don't underestimate the power of the relationship. The other thing I would say here, Nate, that I have found in this process is that a good lender, if it's a reputable lender that really is looking out for you and your best interest, you may come to them with one idea, but
Mhm.
because of what's going on in the market and interest rates and products, we see this a lot with something like a doctor loan or a pharmacist home loan. That may be the best product, but it may not be in the moment because of what's going on with interest rates. So again, you don't want to get too narrow, and a good lender will help you take a step back to say, hey, we were thinking about option A, but really right now, because of what's going on in the market, really this is a better path forward. So the relationship, again, I think can really help with that.
Yeah, and I'll tell you from my experience, if I've got a client that comes to me and says, "Hey, Nate, here's what I'm thinking of doing," I have lenders in my Rolodex of people that I can say, "Look, this guy knows all the options for your market and your situation. Like,
Yeah.
just go ask him and say, look, here, we're looking to do this. Help us understand what our best choices are, because we're not all lenders, right? So, like, send them right to that expert to be able to
Yeah.
understand the process."
Especially important. I'm thinking of people that, maybe have more complicated situations where,
Mhm.
hey, I don't have consistent W-2 income, or I've got a situation where I'm self-employed or my spouse is self-employed and we've got to prove income in a different way. So,
Yep.
again, not all lending relationships, like financial planners, not all financial planners create equal. So we got to do our homework. Nate, you're in a really unique position as a pharmacist, still practicing pharmacist, by the way, and a real estate agent and a real estate investor. I feel like you're in a really unique position to be able to help pharmacists that are going through the home buying journey, whether it's their first home purchase, their second home purchase, their third home purchase, or perhaps they're looking at an investment property, to be able to guide them along in their journey, answer questions that they have, and ultimately point them to a real estate agent that hopefully has their best interest in mind based on the network, based on the Rolodex that you've built over several years. So you're doing that through your concierge service through the Real Estate RPH. Tell us more about that concierge service and where folks can find more information about that.
Yeah, this all stemmed from my initial experience in buying a home, and it was a fine experience. I did what most people do, where I asked a friend who they recommended using, and again, it was fine. I felt like we understood the process by the end of it, but I wanted to take things a step further for people out there and say, like, how do you actually understand the process, educate yourself about the process, have good success rather than just a fine experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we created the concierge service, was to create that opportunity for people that are lost in this, or just want that extra piece of help, to say, okay, I want to come to you, Nate, and we're going to have a 30-minute planning call of, here are my goals, here's what I'm trying to do, here's our situation based on student loans, based on debt, based on need to invest, whatever the story may be. Let's just talk through that, and then we can develop a plan for moving forward. Just like I said at the beginning, right? The best plan is to have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have any plan, just jumping in, you're going to feel that stress and that loss of just being kind of in 10 different directions. So the concierge service, available for free for pharmacists and really anyone, through our website, realestaterph.com. You can go there, click on concierge service, get a call scheduled with me. After that 30-minute planning call, we will get you connected with an agent that we have worked with in the past, or if we have no one in your area yet, we'll interview agents on your behalf to find someone who's a really good fit. Get you connected, you can get off and rolling, and it feel good by taking that first step in a direction that you know is a positive one, rather than just like jumping into the middle and seeing what happens. So we've had a lot of success with that. Again, completely free service for anyone that wants to sign up for it, as a way to kind of jump into the real estate buying process.
Yeah, several things, Nate, I love about what you've done through that service. One, you are a pharmacist. You get it. You've been through the home purchase. You've made some of the common mistakes. You've got wisdom to share, right, with other folks. And again, also investors, if people are looking for an investor-friendly agent. Two, there's someone along the way that can help hold their hand, answer questions, even if they're working with an agent that's local in their market. Always helpful to have a second opinion, and to do some of the work that we talked about earlier, putting together a team. If you can help to vet agents to find someone that's a good fit for them, and then that agent is the centerpiece of their team, that can be a very valuable process as well. For those that are watching this, and everyone's at a different timeline in their home buying journey, right? It can be everywhere from, hey, I'm listening to this and I'm looking right now, to I think I'm a year out or 2 years out. Where would you recommend, based on the timeline to purchase? How would you then recommend folks reach out to you to engage in that service?
Yeah, I think the optimal time is probably in that 0 to 6 month mark. If you're ready to buy sometime in the next 6 months, like, that's the perfect time to reach out to me. Earlier than that, we can absolutely help, and kind of get a plan in place for the future. But much earlier than that, and you're gonna be looking at a market that changes 6 or 12 months down the road, and so it may not be worthwhile. Your plans might change, your budget might change. So it's good to have those conversations early, but in that like 6 months to go window, that's really when you can start to say, okay, we're ready to actually look at homes. We need to have an agent with these private showings. We want to start negotiating contracts, start talking to lenders. Like, all those pieces start to really fall into line about 6 months before you're ready to buy.
Great stuff, Nate. Again, realestaterph.com. We'll link to that here in the show notes. Check out Nate's site, Concierge Service. You can book a call, jumpstart call with Nate. Always appreciate your perspective that you bring here, that you bring on the podcast. And if anyone has any questions on the home buying journey, send us an email, info@yourfinancialpharmacist.com, and we'll try to get Nate back to tee those up in the future. So, Nate, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.